Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's TechGirl Workshop on AI ethics and leadership. My name is Kani Talabani, Community Editor at Hot Topics, and I'll be your host for the session. Now, this is our fifth virtual event of the year, and it's also our first one since we hosted our first TechGirl Festival last month at Cambridge United Football Club. Now, for those who hadn't seen or joined, tech girls and senior business leaders came together in teams to help catapult the club into the 21st century with some amazing digital ideas. If you'd like to learn more, please do check out the festival on our website. Now, moving on to today's events, today's session is especially important because AI and automation are transforming the way we live, work, and connect. Now, over the next 45 minutes, we'll explore how leaders can prevent bias in AI, foster accountability, and build trust, all while driving responsible innovation. You'll hear from our panel of speakers, and some of you have submitted a few questions in advance for them to answer directly, which we will get to towards the end. I will now allow our speakers to introduce themselves.
Hello, my name is Georgina Owens and I'm a Chief Technologist. I work with organisations to help them on their transformation journey, both small and large, and I'm happy to be here today to talk about this topic.
Thank you. And Mariana?
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Mariana. I'm the former head of data governance for WPP, and I have more than 20 years of experience across the technology areas of telecommunications, banking, and advertising groups. And I'm very happy to be here today and being part of the discussions.
Thank you very much, both. Now, to start us off, let's ground ourselves in the basics of responsible AI. I'd love to hear how each of you thinks about this in your own work. So in your own words, what does responsible AI mean to you? And I'm going to start with you, Georgina.
Okay, thank you. So I think there's lots to talk about around ethics and things like that. But for me, the key thing about being responsible is doing AI for the right reasons. You know, we're hearing an awful lot of hype of we're going to use AI to replace people to save money. I think if you're going into AI with that mindset, then you're not thinking responsibly about how you're going to use this technology. You know, what we understand is that AI can be used as enhancing, so a hybrid workforce of AI and humans. So we're not replacing, but we're enhancing.
Mariana, do you agree with that? What's your definition? What's your view on this?
Yeah, I totally agree with Georgina. I think AI is there for the good of society and not to replace anyone, but be a complementary tool that is available for everyone to use, something that's transparent, something that you can prove the accountability, and definitely something that's going to make people's life easier, but not replace anyone by any means.
So following up from that, what do you think is the most pressing ethical risk that you see in AI today? Any of you can take this one.
Okay, I'll kick off again then. I think transparency. I mean, Mariana's already talked about transparency, and I've been working with some companies looking at HR AI recently, and there's all sorts of benefits and advantages that we can get from using AI in recruitment processes, for example. You know, it takes away a lot of the manual tasks, but you've got to be really careful, and because bias can creep into the process so easily with using AI, because you're setting the parameters. So whoever is setting the parameters for the selection, for example, feeding the model, then effectively they could be introducing bias into that process right at the very beginning. So having guardrails around implementation of any AI for a process and thinking about these kinds of elements up front, I think is really important.
I've heard, bias and fairness come up quite a lot. I mean, Mariana, how do you think companies can start addressing that?
There's a number of ways, Connie, and just to add to what Georgina said in terms of the element of bias and lack of transparency, there's a problem related to privacy and security as well in terms of how the information is managed, especially if you're talking about personal information. And there's also the lack of accountability that can be created in how AI is used, and ultimately how is it controlled in more extreme cases that I can think of in industries like the military sector, for example. But in terms of controls that we can put in place to avoid that, there's a case that Georgina alluded to with regards to HR and hiring processes. So you have to make sure that you train your data to allow it to feed models to do not amplify any biases that you have in terms of population, which might lead to more unfairness in the hiring process, for example, or even more discrimination in terms of the outcomes that you might generate. So you have to be quite cautious about how transparent is the data that you're using to feed the model, and who is accountable for this data in the end of the day. I think these are two essential points that I would add here.
So can you share any more examples then where AI bias and a lack of that accountability caused real world issues?
I mean, the best one we had was, I can't remember, was it Microsoft or was it Twitter, where somebody allowed the AI model to make its own mind up based on some previous information that was very racist and inappropriate. And they started to train it with that information. And then, of course, what it started to do was to relay that back as real world experience, and that was a very, very, I mean, they had to shut it down really quickly, and I think a lot of lessons were learned from those early days. But that gives you feed a model with inappropriate information, then it's going to take that as the truth, and so you need, you will have heard the term human in the loop. So, you've got to have your checkpoints and make sure that you're validating through the whole AI life cycle, what's going in and what's coming out, and at the various stages, putting those checks in place.
So, I mean, what are the guardrails and, what lessons can be learned from that, do you think? What should leaders be doing right now?
Policy.
Mariana.
Yeah.
Oh, Georgina.
So I was waiting for Mariana. If you wanted to go, Mariana, it's up to you.
Okay. Georgina, but that's fine. I think there's a number of things that you have to be mindful of, especially when you have a certain amount of data cataloged. How representative is this data across the whole spectrum of the population? You make this case, Georgina, about the data being highly skewed towards a certain group. And in healthcare recently, I was reading about the research that happened, that the results of the research came while they were using AI to show that a certain group of the population was more prone to have a certain disease. And that was not realistic. Everybody was prone to have the disease in the same way, but because the data had been cataloged towards a group that was reporting more often the disease, the whole model inferred that ultimately this certain group was the one that would be more prone to that. So it's another type of error that you might end up having. And as a leader, you have to be quite mindful when looking at these results. Take them with a pinch of salt. Try to refer back to the data. Try to see certain patterns that might ultimately give you a response that might be completely off track from what you're trying to prove.
It's a bit like a fortune teller, right? When you go to a fortune teller and they ask lots of questions, and they ask you questions in a way because they want to get the answers that you want to hear, because you're going there because they want you to, to tell you the future, and then they will find out what you want the future to be, and they'll tell you that. And that's exactly how you can work with a model, right? If you you can make sure that the answer pretty much comes out to what you want it to be by asking the right question. And so that upfront piece of work, ensuring that you throw in, I'd say, throw in the questions that are going to give a completely different answer to. It's a bit like when you're doing a drug test, right? And you put in the pill that doesn't work, just to kind of see whether people still find that it works for them. You've almost got to take that sort of approach.
Mariana, is that something you'd agree with? Or do you have a different analogy to kind of describe that?
I agree with, and as Georgina mentioned, it was an example for drug, give an example about the healthcare. You have to ensure that the representability of the data is broad enough to cover as many possible use cases so that the results don't amplify the initial elements of bias that you have on your data. So I think that's quite crucial. So if you go back to the source and it always starts on the data, make sure that your data set is as broad as possible, is as much clean as possible. So make sure that your data quality parameters are in place. So ultimately the results come and they're as much accurate as possible.
Thank you.
I think asking a lot of questions as well, right? Because people are going to give you reports now. And you don't know where that report has come from. Previously, you asked somebody to write something for you, and it was going to be based on their experience, or they'd talk to other people, and they would know who they'd spoken to. They would know that the people that they'd spoken to have got the experience that is required to give them the answers, and therefore they'd pull all that together, and you'd get the report. Now you don't know whether they've spoken to people that they know, or they've just gone into multiple different engines and asked the questions and then just pulled all that together. So you have to be, as a consumer of information, you have to be far more diligent in finding out what the source of that information is.
And you mentioned policy earlier. Would that be part of the policies then, to be more diligent and to have multiple checkpoints before doing anything and carrying out those tasks?
I think a lot of the policy stuff that's being written at the moment is much more about how to use it and where to use it. So I was working with a school and their compliance governor, and she was asking me, how do we cope with this? How do we deal with students using it or not using it? I said, well, that's very difficult, because if you just ban it outright off of all of your equipment, then they're just going to use their mobile and they're going to use it, right? So, it's about education, and it's about explaining to them what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. And then there's kind of a big element of trust as well, right? You've got to trust them that that they will be honest about how they're using it and where they're using it.
I'm glad you mentioned trust, actually, because that's one of my my next questions. But it's more about, I guess, leadership and practice, because building responsible AI just isn't about the tech. It's also about the people leading the way. And as leaders, how do you build that trust with customers, regulators, and your own teams when you're implementing that AI?
I would start with the point on documentation. You have to be really, really transparent about how you are creating the information, or you're joining, or you're amalgamating the information that's going to be feeding these models. So transparency is key. Then the governance that goes around it, who is accountable for what, who owns this data, and who ultimately signs off on that and say that's accurate and that's a genuine source of truth. So I think that's another very important point. Who can explain the results ultimately? Because AI is going to process whichever is there in front of it to be processed and come up with a result. But is this understandable? Does it make sense? That's the piece where you need the human element that we made reference to from the beginning of the call. That is where the information is definitely going to be parsed and explained clearly to see if it's making any sense. So I think it's a combination of these different elements that gives credibility, and ultimately when you're presenting this to a regulator, that's what's going to make the judgment of the regulator positive or negative towards what you're being able to present.
Yeah, and I think trust, establishing trust and credibility in anything that you do is no different here to what it has been in the past. So if you're working with an organization that you've worked with previously, and you know that they're credible, and that you can rely on what they're doing for you, then I would say, they're a trusted partner. So if you've got trusted partners, then continue to work with them. There's an absolute massive amount of new AI companies out there who are popping up every single day. How do you know which ones of those to trust? I would say use your network. Find out from your network who is being used, and who your peers are finding to be successful, and finding that they can integrate and work well with your business. So very much cool, and Hot Topics is a great example of a vast network of people who are, doing this kind of thing every day. So I would very much say that that's the sort of community that you need to lean upon.
So, what does that look like in practice, establishing that trust and credibility? What do you do in your everyday roles to kind of achieve that?
From our point of view, or from a supplier's point of view?
I'd say from a leader's point of view, so yours.
I think it's just, as I said, you kind of have a track record of what you've done previously, how you've delivered what you said you would deliver, and that's how you get trust from people, right? I think it's that simple. I don't know, Mariana, what do you think?
Yeah, it always comes with the track record of what you're able to generate for the company, what's the ROI that the projects you worked on were able to bring in, how you're able to basically put people together to work as a team and make an outcome become a reality. So it's a number of different elements that comes on the back of delivering a big project that must coexist to make the project feasible. And then comes the element of trust. Are you a trustworthy leader? People that rely on you, people like to work with you, people want to make sure that they are part of your team when there is something big coming on the way. So it's all elements that shows this element of reliance that people can have on you because they know that something good is going to be produced on the back of whatever you're leading.
I think, also, demonstrating success with data. So, if you're going to do something, make sure that the measures are fully understood around what it is that you're going to do. And going back to sort of the many AI suppliers, if a supplier is saying that they can give you 30% improvement on processing time around a certain business process, then make sure that you understand how long it takes you today, so that when you put the new tool in, that it's 30% better. If you don't know where you're starting from, then you can't prove whether it was 30% better or 1% better. So metrics are an important part of establishing trust and credibility.
Is that something you'd agree with as well, Mariana?
Oh, definitely. If you cannot measure it, you cannot prove that you're delivering, right? So you need to have a clear set of KPIs from inception to be able to show that you're making progress towards these targets. Otherwise, it becomes a quite a terror exercise when you go through this massive multi-year, multi-million-dollar type of projects, and you're not going to be able to track and show which value you're adding to the organization.
Absolutely. And then moving on then, for the young women here, the tech girls who are watching right now, who want to step into those senior tech leadership roles in the future, what kind of skills or mindsets do you think are most critical to becoming an ethical leader in AI?
So I was involved in a discussion around younger people coming into the world of technology with AI recently, and I think part of that discussion was that because of the massive amount of technology that they consume today and how technology is woven into their lives, they will find that the acceptance of AI quite natural. But also, because of this, that makes them a little bit too trusting, because it's just like new stuff's coming all the time, and I'll just embrace it, I'll take it, I'll do it, and it's just like, yeah. But they're also very, very good at dismissing new technology very quickly, which is, okay, it didn't work in 2 clicks for me, so it's gone. So I'll go, but there's another one there, so I'll go to that. So their mindset of embracing new technology means that they will accept these changes very, very easily. But there may be a certain amount of naivety and gullibleness in that they will just believe it's right because it's there. So that mindset needs to change, and they need to become a little bit more less trusting and a bit more challenging in terms of some of the new stuff that's constantly coming their way.
I think the key is to take responsibility from day one and make sure that you collaborate with a team. That's essential when you're starting your career and you want to become a reliable partner and you want to make use of the best technology that's there. Make sure that you communicate quite well what you're doing. Make sure that across every single step of your journey, you display empathy with the individuals you're going to be working with. So it's a blend of like not only technical skills, but also personal skills that are super important to be able to develop a career in this space, I would say.
So I have a question for both of you then. Knowing what you know now, if you go back to when you first stepped into your first senior technology role, would you be trusting or would you be challenging, as Georgina put it, when it comes to these new emerging technologies and adopting AI? I'll come to you first, Georgina, since you're the one who put that phrase to us.
I would always be challenging. I would always start from the point of view of prove it to me. So, that's just the way that I am. So, prove it to me and challenge, and then earn my trust, and then I'll be okay.
Is it the same for you, Mariana?
Definitely the challenging piece. Think strategically and challenge everything that you see in front of you. Never thrust on first sight. Be really inquisitive, raise lots of questions. I think that's the secret.
Okay, lovely. And going back to the fairness and AI then, and bias, when we talk about diversity, what's one way that leaders can ensure that diverse voices are heard in AI design and deployments?
Such a tough one, because so much of the source data is generated from a non-diverse audience. And I mean, you can, and I'm sure Mariana will talk much more eloquently about this than I will, in terms of segmenting your data and segmenting your data sources to ensure that you can get a balanced view. But, we've talked about transparency a lot, and I think that's absolutely critical to understand the source of the data and think about that segmentation. Mariana, please take over from me and give better explanation.
Well, I think the starting point is that if you want to have a quite broad scope of data, you have to have a broad scope of views, which means having a broad scope of professionals from different backgrounds you work with. Don't restrain yourself to just saying, I just want technology specialists here to give a view in terms of what we want to do. Be really open-minded. At times, like the most like radical ideas and different ideas to the ones you have, it's what's going to aggregate and bring the best outcome. So I would say be open-minded about this, because that's only when people can contribute with very different and disparate points of view. That's when you can like enhance the scope of what you're bringing ultimately into a model and ultimately to the outcome that the model is going to be generating.
Lovely, thank you very much. We'll move on to the audience Q&A section of the workshop now. So, I mean, we've already covered quite a lot of ground here, and I'd like to start with the first one then, which is, what is the biggest myth about AI and ethics that you'd like to bust? I will open this one to both of you. You can jump in whenever.
I think speed of being able to deliver the benefits. There's a lot around. We can save 10%, 20%, 30%, 50%. And by doing this, we're going to get rid of all white collar jobs, for example. And we're going to do it in two years' time, 3 years' time. The world is moving fast, but I don't think it's going to move as fast as some of the scary predictions that are out there. So I think we should bust that myth until we see a little bit more evidence. And like I said, right at the beginning, just because some processes are going to be replaced by AI, that doesn't mean that, there's going to be hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of jobs, hundreds and hundreds of people without jobs. I heard a prediction last week saying that this was going to add 18.7 billion to the growth of the country, and that there'd be more jobs and less people as a result of AI making us, move faster and more innovatively. So let's hope that that's right, and that actually we're focusing more on the growth side of it rather than the doom and gloom of everybody's going to be out of work because robots are taking over from us.
And I would say like a tremendous myth bust would be the idea that humans prefer to interact with robots rather than other humans. I absolutely hate at times when I'm trying to have an answer to an exception to the rule, and robots are not prepared to handle exceptions, and they just keep like returning answers that are completely disconnected to what I'm asking. And my frustration, I think, is the one of everyone that has to go like through a process where they have non-linear cases that they're trying to resolve and don't have a human being, a human face on the other side to help to resolve and accommodate for the type of issue that you're trying to basically resolve. So I think it's a big myth bust, this idea that it's always better to interface robots rather than humans. I don't think so.
Is that something you agree with, Georgina?
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah. Although I don't want to contradict, because I do agree with what you said. I did hear something last week where they had evidence that people preferred to talk to a robot counselor. And the only reason why was because they felt that it wouldn't be judgmental, as opposed to when they were talking to a person, they felt that a person would always be judgmental, whereas a robot would be just factual. But on the opposite side, flip side of that, I think you lose an element of human empathy by talking to a robot only. So that might be one case where people feel that they prefer to talk to a robot.
I could see the look of relief on Mariana's face there when you mentioned the empathy aspect. So you got both sides, Georgina. I think she was happy to hear that part. Now the next question.
I think that for linear problems, Kanye, if I can just add here,
yeah.
Handling a robot can be quite quick and easy in terms of getting a quick answer. The problem, as I said, is when you're talking about the exceptions, and it doesn't replace a human being in the end of the day to be able to understand the problem in full, understand the nuances that makes it different, and understand that they are going to need to give a different answer to that.
Absolutely. And the next question then is something that Georgina touched on earlier. Someone said, I've heard people say that AI could take away jobs in the future. Should young people be worried about that, or are there new kind of jobs that they should be preparing for instead? I'll let you take this one, Georgina.
Okay. No, they shouldn't be worried about it. But what they should definitely be is aware of the changing landscape, and therefore, and I would hope that schools are starting to help to assist with this, and that they would, when they do their careers advice, would be suitably trained to understand that things are changing, that there are some roles that will absolutely be taken over by technology and automation, and therefore recommending those going for those roles would not be, a sensible decision. So, but it's still early days. It's still very early days. I mean, if we look at law, for example, a lot of legal work is based on reading past historical cases, and then making sense out of, those cases to help with a judgment. Now, you may have had, junior legal, paralegal assistants who would do all of that reading and the summarizing and pulling it together for a more senior legal lawyer to then use it to make a judgment. That can all be done now by AI. That is a classic example of where AI actually can help. But does that mean that the junior assistant is therefore no longer required? No, it just means that they can jump into the more advanced role of decision making earlier than what they might have done before. That would be my kind of view on it.
It's very different to the doom and gloom you were mentioning earlier, Georgina. Mariana, what about your views on this?
I think new technologies bring new opportunities, new frontiers to be explored and to be broadened. And I think the schools of today are preparing the kids for jobs that don't even exist. There might be traditional jobs, yes, they certainly will be there by the time that my kids reach the point of going to the job market. But there are also professions that we don't even think that exist, and they are going to be on their way. So the curriculum of the schools nowadays are much broader than what they were perhaps 30, 40 years ago. They incorporate lots of topics related to technology. They start instigating the curiosity of kids at a very early age in how to use these technologies, but also how to make them aware of the risks that comes associated to that. So I think this is a quite progressive way to educate the kids and the young workforce in what's yet to come. So I don't think anyone should fear be jobless in the end of the day because there is no new technology, but really embrace and explore the new possibilities that are going to come ahead.
Lovely. These are very positive answers, both. I think the audience will appreciate that as well. So as we come to the end of today's workshop, I'd like to ask each of you for a quick reflection. So in one sentence, what's your call to action for young women who want to shape ethical AI in the future?
Don't be scared of it, embrace it, learn as much as you can about it, and incorporate it into your planning for your career and future.
And for me, I would say be really hungry to learn everything that you can possibly have the opportunity to do as many courses as you can, network with as many professionals in the sector as you can, get bits and bobs of good advices from wherever it comes. So I think it's like being an eternal curious is what this new array of young ladies who are coming to the tech sector now, I think that's the key for them to be successful.
Lovely, thank you. I think we'll end it there. On behalf of the TechGirl community, thank you for joining us today both. We look forward to seeing you at our next masterclass covering quantum computing on the 20th of November. If you have any questions for our speakers, please do submit them to the TechGirl website or do reach out to myself or one of the team. Until then, stay tuned for more information on the TechGirl website and have a lovely rest of the day.